Welcome back to Media 7. This won't be just any summer for Bill Francis. In January, the radio network's General Manager of Talk Programming will step back from the job he's held for 16 years. In all, he has worked with his stations for nearly 45 years, and he has been part of the move from public to private ownership and the creation of what we now know as modern talk radio in the 1990s. He's with me now. G'day, Bill.
G'day, Russell.
So how did it start with you in radio?
Well, 45 years ago, can I remember? Well, in fact, I can remember very well my first day in broadcasting. And I literally changed out of short trousers into long trousers and went off to work as a cadet with the NZBC in a town called Masterton. And it was very much public service radio. You arrived at work and you had to sign the time book, first of all. You had to be there at 8:25, and a blue line went in at 8:25, and then a red line went in at 8:30. And if you weren't there by 8:30 and you were below the red line, the accounts lady would then take this book down to the manager. So that's how I started.
You were a civil servant like any other civil servant. Yes. How do you think that affected what came out on the radio? You know, because everyone who worked in radio at that point of any kind was a civil servant, weren't they?
They were. What managed to get broadcasting or keep broadcasting going was the enormous talent amongst the people that were behind the microphone. These were enormously talented people, as good as anything you see today. But the difficulty was that the radio stations and the television stations were run by public service type managers who, you know, looked after time books and that sort of stuff instead of creating the creativity that would enable people to do their best work.
It was actually only in 1996 that the radio network stations passed out of public ownership into private hands. I was quite surprised when I did my research and read that. It seems like it was a lot longer ago.
Well, suddenly there was a decision that Radio New Zealand should split between commercial and non-commercial, and that was a very good idea because the two didn't really gel together, and it enabled public radio to go off on its own with the support of the public, of course, state-funded, and commercial radio to find their own way, backed by private ownership.
There was a sense in which the change there had already happened, though, wasn't there? I mean, if you go back to the time everyone talks about is the January 1987. Merv Smith, who's been there forever, has legged it off to Radio I. You don't have a breakfast host, and Brett Harmon rings up this young chap called Paul Holmes and brings him to Auckland.
And this has been caused by the deregulation of radio, which meant that anyone could start up a radio station virtually. And this proliferation of radio stations meant that you had to find a niche. And 1ZB, as it was then, was an all things to all people radio station.
It was like the family radio station, wasn't it?
It played music, and it had been founded on those wonderful serials that used to play in the evening and so on, and during the morning when the housewives were dusting the furniture and so on. But this all changed with deregulation, and it meant that a brand, you had to find a brand, and Brent Harmon decided on the News Talk ZB brand to take the place of 1ZB. Merv Smith, who was the incumbent breakfast host, liked playing country and western music. Well, that clearly didn't fit into this new genre. So away they went looking for a host, and they found Paul Holmes. And I mean, he was there for the next 22 years. Who
seemed to be ideally suited for this new conception of what talk radio was, wasn't he? You know, you had a healthy ego there, let's be honest.
Healthy ego.
And he projected something more maybe than, you know, Merv Smith had been avuncular. Paul Holmes wasn't avuncular, was he?
No, but Paul had the background and the history in current affairs and news. I mean, he loved the past of history, and he could bring that to the sort of concepts that he developed on the radio. But, I mean, Paul was also an entertainer and a storyteller, and all these factors gelled together to make him the very rounded broadcaster that he became, and in my belief, the best broadcaster of our time.
On the other hand, he had his controversial moments. And I you know,
which caused me a bit of angst.
Exactly. No, you always, whether it was Paul Holmes or someone else on the station, you always seemed to be willing to front for those people. You were the guy that would stand up there and take the questions. Was that important to you to do that?
It was. I mean, talent management is a very interesting part of leadership, which is an aspect of it that I've enjoyed very much, and I've worked with some wonderful people. But the reality is that you send good hosts like Paul Holmes out onto the air to sit on the edge, and if sometimes they go over the edge, then you have to be there to support them and uphold them, and that was something that I always faced up to very willingly, because that was part of what I did, which was to push them into doing things.
Were there private bollockings behind the public support?
Someone asked me, I remember being interviewed on Checkpoint after the Cheeky Darkie incident, and Mary Wilson said to me, "So did you shout at him?" Afterwards, and I've never shouted at any host in my life or any person that I've managed, because that is
which
not
is
my way.
unusual in radio, because there are some
Yes.
there are some foul
Yes.
tempers in radio, aren't there?
There are, and I think the thing that I've always tried to do with leadership in radio is develop trust. Keep close to them. It's not a 9-to-5 job. You have to know what they're doing outside of those hours, and whether they're in difficulties or whatever. And they're vulnerable characters. Because they're living on the edge and trying to deliver to an audience, sometimes when they're criticised and the audience don't like what they do, they rather fall in a heap and fall on the floor. And you've got to be there to pick them up and see if you can get them going again. And most of them jump back, of course.
Talk radio and talkback in particular has had the reputation in recent years of being the home of uninformed prejudice. I presume you disagree with that, but why would you?
I've always tried to push the line or the avoidance of whinge radio. But I mean, people are involved in talkback, the talkback side of talk radio, for a number of reasons. One of them, and it's opinion radio. They want to express an opinion. Some of them agree with the host. Some of them disagree violently with the host, and that creates polarisation and therefore good listening. And then there is the voyeurism aspect of people who tune in to hear what people are developing in their arguments, so that they can take it to the water cooler tomorrow and use it as their opinion. So that's basically what happens.
So what's the future for that talk radio format? I mean, it looks as strong as ever now, but are you in danger of your audience ageing? Because that's happened to Radio Pacific, didn't it?
It did, but Radio Pacific aged. People were dying at the top end, but there was no one coming in at the bottom end, and that's what you try and do. You try and regenerate the audience, and you do that by regenerating the hosts and making sure that your content is contemporary and so on. And if you can do that, then you've got a chance of keeping going. One of the things with talk radio is that when people get into their 30s, they get married and they have partners and they start to have children. And they become interested in the things that talk radio are on about, which is education and health and the economy and so on. And so that there is a captive audience out there who, if you can deliver attractively to them in the way you broadcast, then you've got a good chance of getting them.
So do you think there's any way that talk radio is going to have to change in the next 10 years? I mean, you've embraced the internet at News Talk ZB. It took you a wee while, but you seem to be, that seems to work for you now.
I have no doubt about the future, Russell, but with so much new media, you have to embrace all of it, basically. And if you ignore it, you'll ignore it at your peril. So, we have our hosts twittering and some of them are on Facebook, no doubt. And we have a webcam so that you can see our hosts in action, that sort of thing. So those are the sort of things that we will have to continue to do and not ignore. We're not just core radio. In talk radio, we do have something that is very valuable to all of those new media outlets, and that is we have content. We have news and we have weather and we have traffic and we have all those sorts of informational things that can be used in a variety of ways.
Well, on that note, we'll have to go. You're not entirely retiring, you're going to be a consultant, so best of luck with your semi-retirement.
Thank you, Russell.
Thank you, Bill Francis. And now from the airwaves to the arts. In the New Zealand magazine world, a circulation of 30,000 is solid, more so for a niche style magazine. Simon Powan looks at the title called The New Order which is doing just that. But don't feel bad if you haven't heard of it. They sell 29,500 of those magazines overseas.
Recently, the In The Know Arty fraternity gathered in Auckland's Newton for an exhibition by some of the most fashionable and sought-after US artists working in the contemporary world right now. They're from a gallery called Oh Wow in Miami, that people who know about this sort of thing tell me is awesome.
Yeah, the artists here are enormous. This is probably, you know, without being biased towards my own gallery, this is probably one of the biggest shows in contemporary art this year, and it's right here in Newton.
That's Adam Bryce, who, from this corner of the world, pulled this together. He has the contacts to do so from Auckland because he publishes some of the most influential fashion publications in the world. There's fashion trend-spotting Bible The New Order and the cultural pulse keeper blog Slam X Hype. Although little known here, they are massive overseas.
The New Order magazine, it's really, really big in Europe. The people who subscribe to our magazine include people like Marc Jacobs, Kanye West, Karl Lagerfeld, Richard Prince.
And Slam X Hype has millions of visits every month.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, it's definitely, you know, the biggest side of its nature in the world. There's no doubt about that. The influence that the site has is much bigger than we could have ever expected as well. Not only by attracting a lot of people, but also the direct influence you can see that it has on art or on fashion.
It's amazing. Like, I was kind of blown away that that he's based out of New Zealand, you know, because it's, you know, like, it caught me off guard, and I was like, wow, that's weird. Like, that doesn't make sense at all. Like, how, you know, how does he have his hand in so many things all over the world? And he's usually the first to get to it, and a lot of the other blogs and everything, you know what I mean, will feed off what he's tapped into.
They aren't the only cultural campaigns Adam runs. He also pushes a thing he calls Support the Independents, an interesting solution to the problem that, in the creative industries, often everyone expects everything for free.
So essentially the principle came from the fact that if you're someone's friend, then you shouldn't be getting free magazines or free CDs or free art. You should be buying it before anyone else buys it, because you should be supporting what they're trying to do.
So there we go, a huge international success story and an interesting idea about supporting independent creatives, both from here, that you may never have heard of, but are really cool.
It certainly doesn't help me financially to open a gallery here and bring artists all the way from New York. But what it does do is that it enables me to kind of create the culture that I love so much in my own backyard.
For more of what Adam is up to, check out thewire.co.nz, which is another venture trying to spark things in the local creative scene.
Simon Pound with that report, and with that our show. Thanks again to Bill Francis and to our panellists Christina Wickstead, Joe Cotton and Tracy Barnett. And thanks to you for watching. We'll be back with Media 7 at the same time next week. Until then, goodbye.